Hello, everyone. This is Baseball Over 312 here. Welcome to the weekly rant. You may be wondering why Failure is not here, and nobody else is here. Well, Chew Dude's at uni, and so he couldn't make it to a later rant this week, and we started another one, but unfortunately there were some technical difficulties, so I'm doing the rant solo this week. I hope you enjoy it. Probably not going to be the best thing, but uh, well, it'll have to do. So this week we had three pretty important things: Umloop, Kern Brussels Kern, and Astana getting their Pro Tour license in question. First off, we have Umloop Het Nieuwsblad. One of the first big races of the season. It's been pretty meh so far. After Down Under, there's a downtime, but Umloop gets you right into the swing of things. The February Cobbled Classic. And this is what it's all about. So, Umloop Het Nieuwsblad, it's the 70th edition, and it was won by, spoiler alert, Enan Stannard of Team Sky. Now, what happened here was a pretty interesting race. There were attacks, and what ended up forming was a group at the front with 4 riders and a group behind with 3 riders behind a peloton that ended up almost 5 minutes back. Pretty useless, pretty uneventful. But the catch is that 3 of the guys in the first 4 were, in fact, Quick-Step riders at Quick-Step, and the other was Ian Stannard. So there was Terpstra, Bonin, Vandenberg, Ian Stannard. And in the group behind, there was Sepp Van Mark, Greg Van Avermaet, and Zednik Stibar, another Quick-Step rider, which made the tactics that Quick-Step put out extremely uncanny. So first off, they neglected to show any sort of regard towards Stibar. Instead, they just kept pacing really hard. They were afraid of Van Avermaet and Van Marke possibly getting onto the front group. It was obvious. So in the front, they paced all of their guys extremely hard and probably outdid them a bit. They let Ian Stannard just sit on, which was a very strange strategy because they had a fresh guy behind. And I guess it makes sense that they want to keep their 3-1 advantage, but they're tiring out their guys, and the worst that could happen is that they maybe not let, but not, prevent at all costs the second group from getting back. And then they have a fresh Zednik Stibar. They still have a 4-3 total in comparison to the other teams, and the 3 are all on separate teams too. So you have 4 out of 7 guys in a group, and none of them are very hurt, while you have Van Mark and Van Avermaet who are pacing to get back on, and they are more tired. So that itself is very questionable, but once they did push it to the point where the second group was not going to get back, it became pretty simple that it was a 3-1 race. It was 3 Quick-Step riders versus Stannard. And instead of waiting for the sprint or sending one guy up the road and just making Stannard work a bit, they tried, several counter moves that didn't really work very well because of some tactical flaws. Now, first, Stannard put in an acceleration. Wasn't huge. It was kind of just there, and it made sense that they would try to open the attacks. I would have thought Vandenberg, who, no offense to him, is the weakest cobbles guy and strength guy out of all of them. I would have thought that they would have sent him up the road first, but, it made sense that they would send Terpstra. And Stannard had to pace, but Stannard had been sitting on for 30K, so obviously Stannard was able to catch Terpstra, who had been pacing this entire time. Then Bonin put into it an attack, which was questionable in itself. Bonin's the best sprinter out of that group for sure, and you want him to be fresh for the sprint. So having him go up the road was a bit questionable, but it was a really good attack. It put Stannard on the ropes again, and he clawed it back. Terpstra made another move, right as Bonin was getting caught. However, this is the stupidest moment of the race, where Steen Vandenberg, what? I don't know what was going through his mind. He grabs the wheel of Terpstra, basically confirms that Stannard is going to stay on, and the rise in pace immediately after Bonin gets caught puts him on the ropes. Stannard puts in a bit of a dig. Vandenberg then paces, cracks. Bonin is working with Terpstra until Terpstra decides, no, I have to put in an acceleration to make up these 5 meters, and Bonin gets shelled off the back. Meanwhile, Bonin lingers there for about 2 to 3 seconds for the rest of the race until the sprint. So maybe they shouldn't have just left him behind, but that basically just wiped away their numbers advantage. They now have a one-on-one between Stannard and Terpstra. And in the end, Stannard is doing the pacing most of the time. And then Terpstra goes with 300 meters to go, allowing Stannard to get his wheel and come around in the last bit to win it. Wow, that was pretty bad by Quickstep. They definitely have the strongest cobbles team out there, but sometimes, it's not about that. It's about smarts. And what you basically ended up with was from a 3-1 break where you have the second strongest, if not the strongest, cobbles guy of the last decade, along with with a Paris-Roubaix winner and a very solid domestique against Ian Stannard. And you end up with a situation much like last year where it was GVA versus Stannard, and GVA overestimated it just like Terpstra did. Stannard's able to come around, even though Stannard is a horrible sprinter. You have to question the tactics. It's really more of a lost race than a won race in this situation. And not saying that it was easy for Stannard, but he did sit on, and he kind of had it given to him by that tactical flaw, especially the one by Steen Vandenberg. I'm not sure if, as a critic of racing in itself, if it's easy to just sit by and say, well, they made a couple of flubs there. In a race like this, which is a fairly big race for this early in the season, that you can just let those tactical mistakes get to you. And honestly, in my opinion, like I said before with letting them catch up, I think that it would have been just a better plan to mark Stannard, make sure he doesn't get away, and then just sprint it out to the line. Ian Stannard is not a good sprinter, and Tom Bonin, even though he has lost his top speed in the past few years, is still a very decent sprinter, especially from a small group like this. He could be Ian Stannard in no time if you just do a simple lead out. Very questionable tactics, and Umloop ended up being kind of one of those very controversial races. Lefebvre is going to have, and he already has, a lot of criticism, but that might change because of the result of Kern-Brussels-Kern, which happened today. Today, Kern-Brussels-Kern was run, and it ended up being a bunch sprint. There was a big group that got free, around 70K to go, but unfortunately for them, the winds were more of a headwind than the crosswind they had expected. Everything got pushed back together, and it just ended up being a fairly mundane race from there. About 30K to go, everything was caught, and from there it was just a bunch sprint. In the end, Christoph launched, and it looked like he had a really good chance of winning, but Cav was really fast, and he, made it look easy. Classic Cav style. Just coming around, not taking no for an answer, and getting the win. Eli Viviani also had a really good acceleration, and Tom Van Asbrook in fourth. That's a really good result for him. He showed a lot of promise on Top Sport last year, and when Van Marke was caught, he's not that great of a sprinter, so it was nice to see that Lotto NL have some other young guys who can fill in at a time like this. Very, very good by them getting fourth. There was also some other stuff going on. You saw that a couple of guys behind in the sprint got messed up. Most notably, Nasser Buhani was thrown into the gutter. I'm not really sure how that happened, but he is the boxer after all. He's never been a very respectable guy in the sprints, so, some might say what goes around comes around. That might be a little too hard on people, especially when they could be getting injured, but, I agree with it. He is never been a safe sprinter. Usually crashes that he's in are caused by him, and not only because of a technical mistake or something he did wrong just by accident, but because he gets really aggressive and is a very pushy sprinter. So he didn't end up finishing in the top 10. Also behind MTM KBK, you saw EBH was trying to get set up for his sprint. I forget who did it. It might have been a I want to say it might have been Debushera. I'm not really sure, but he got thrown, basically just plowed straight into another guy, and it was very, very hard to watch because I thought he was going to crash. He did not, and he managed to stabilize himself, but he lost a lot of position. And MTN's top rider ended up being Spragley, which was very, very weird because yesterday Tyler Farah said that he was going to be focusing completely on, well, not completely, but mostly on um, cobbled sprints. I mean, like exactly like this race. Then midway through the race, you hear protect EBH at all costs, which was very hard to hear as a Tyler Farah fan, especially how he just said that. So obviously there's a little miscommunication going on. MTN is a stacked team of these subpar, decent, guys who aren't going to win anything, except for, Tour of Beijing Stage 3. But, yeah, they're stacked with these guys, and so you ended up seeing a guy like Spragley, who's not at all a cobbles rider, managing to just pop in and take it, take 8th place. He was their top guy. This is generally a sprinter's race, and it's not always like that, but, most of the time you see this turning out to be a sprinter's race. This is a really good indication of who's going to be good in a race like Gent Wevelgem later in the season. So that's going to be a really good race to watch. That's basically it for Kern Brussels Kern. We some of the guys in the community were debating which race was better, Umloop or Kern. I have to say that Umloop was better because even though the action happened later, there was a lot of action. You didn't really know what was going to happen, especially when these attacks started going off in the final K. It was basically a bunch sprint in Kern. And although I like bunch sprints, I'm not going to, hurt on them at all or try to throw shade or something on Kern Brussels Kern and its bunch sprint. I like bunch sprints, especially when I have a guy in it that I'm rooting for. Most of the time I don't, but when I do, I really enjoy bunch sprints. They're very exciting. But they happen in about 2K, and so I have to go with a race that was more cobbles oriented, had more selection, and was a little bit more finicky in how it was going to turn out, as opposed to the kind of racing that happened in Kern where from 30K to go, pretty much everyone just said, okay, let's line up our sprint trains and go. It's a little disappointing, I have to admit, because as a cycling fan, I look forward to these cobbles races basically for this exact reason. However, there was other things going on this week that might have been overshadowed quite a bit more than they should have been for how important it is. Yeah. So, Astana, they got their World Tour license earlier in the season. And it was pretty much thought that's it, until something happened, down the road, more doping cases or something, that it would stay that way. But instead, you ended up getting Brian Cookson saying that they are, in fact, looking into Astana's World Tour license and they might revoke it, which would be quite the surprise if that had happened. I would probably be. Oh, man, I'm yawning. I'm yawning just thinking about a race without the dopers at Astana, because it would probably be so boring. But Astana and Vinokurov have said that they are willing to work with the license commission to try to work something out. But Cookson's saying that, if they investigate it and find anything more than what's already been said, that they could get their license revoked, which is a pretty big deal. You saw basically the drama that had happened this year with Katusha a couple of years back, and it ended up amounting to nothing, just like you would assume that this would. But I mean, who knows at this point? The thing is if Astana gets canned, you get big riders canned, such as Nibali, and that's a really big hit to the sport. Not saying it's a negative thing, because I'm all for killing all the dopers, but that's a really big deal in the world of cycling for a guy who won the Tour de France last year. I don't think that if they have evidence that it's happening now, or that they're suspicious team now that they could do anything retroactively about last year's Tour de France, but it would definitely, for a sport that has had so much controversy in the past, so much doping happening in the past, then, think about it. The only clean or supposed to be clean Tour de France winner in the last 30 years was Greg LeMond. 25 years ago was thought to be clean, and then now Sastre in '08, but then it was Armstrong, Ulrich, Indurain. These guys are pretty much known dopers. You got guys like Contador, who still has his '07 and '09 wins, but he was caught in 2010 for doping, so he's basically gone. You have Cadell Evans, who is pretty much thought to be clean, but I don't really know. Sometimes he gets really streaky, and even Chudu has expressed that he's suspicious of him. I mean, obviously Wiggins and Froome are very suspicious at the very least. You have to admit that even if you think they're clean, that they're a suspicious team with the way their riders just started to become great all of a sudden, and their mountain trains work. So, yeah, man, if the 2014 Nibali's always been very suspicious among the cycling community, but from the guys who aren't really into cycling and are more of just like, oh, I watched the Tour de France, this is really detrimental, and I'm all for it as a part of the cycling community, a part that believes that the cleanliness of the sport is improving, but from an outside perspective, the publicity that this would give is a really bad representation of the sport, and I fear what it will do. If they get their license revoked, I would support it, but also be afraid of the consequences. And that's a tough spot to be in. Well, going into next week's racing, it's pretty much a dry week. Next weekend, you have some cool races going on. The cobbles trend continues in La Samine, and we'll see who will win there. The start lists aren't confirmed yet, so not really sure. Probably just some runoff of these past weekend's races. Then you have the Drijfstag van West-Vlaanderen, which the start list is confirmed for, and is looking fairly weak. It doesn't look like it's going to be exactly a stacked race. It's just the prologue and then 2 races. I believe there are cobbles. I should probably have checked that before I started the rant, but sometimes that's just the way it works. There are no profiles, but I believe there are cobbles involved in that. And then the next day is Strada Bianca. Last year, Kwiatkowski won that, if I remember correctly. So that's going to be an exciting race. Kind of those strongman / hill finishes are very interesting to watch. Before next weekend, we get the culmination of those with the start of the first real European World Tour race of the season, Paris-Nice, then Torino, the next week. So that's it for this rant, guys. I hope you enjoyed, even though there wasn't a huge deal to talk about, and also the guys weren't here. Chew Dude, Failured, or Jasper Anchor, and Julian Chew, as they are known on this channel. Excuse me for that mistake. But I will see you guys next week in the rant, and shameless plug for my channel. Please don't check it out if you don't want your ears to bleed and your eyes to melt. I've been known to do that. Yeah. So check out the Cycling Hub on cyclinghub.tv. Go check out the forums, check out the videos, and enjoy your stay. For this week's rant, this is Baseball Over 312, signing out.